Under the wide western sky, the land looked endless as if the earth itself had no edge. The stars were scattered like cold embers, and the wind curled low across the prairie, whispering against the grasses. A young woman walked there, wrapped in a shawl that once might have been strong but now hung thin and frayed. Her name was Ahiana, and though she was only 22, her eyes carried the heaviness of winters too long endured. Widowhood had etched shadows into her face, the kind that did not fade when morning came. She had no horse left, no coin to barter, and the night pressed in close, urging her to find shelter before frost stole the warmth from her bones. She saw a faint glimmer ahead, a light trembling against the dark, a ranch house standing like a lantern in the sea of open land. Something inside her wanted to turn away, to keep wandering into the unknown rather than risk another door slammed in her face. Yet her legs betrayed her hesitation, pulling her forward step by step. Hunger gnawed at her, but it was not food alone that pushed her. It was the deep, aching desire to be recognized even for a moment as human again. Would someone inside welcome her, or would the light vanish as soon as she came near? Her knock was soft, but in the night silence it carried. The door opened to the glow of lamplight and laughter. A family gathered around a wooden table. The warmth of roasted meat and baked bread spilled into the chill, but so did the wary eyes of those inside. A woman rose first, tall, stern, and quick to pull her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she studied the stranger. Whispers fluttered across the table. The young widow lowered her gaze, her voice nearly breaking as she spoke. She asked only for a corner by the fire, only for a single night of safety. But suspicion tightened the room like a noose. The ranch mistress's eyes narrowed, the curve of her mouth sharp. A woman alone and of your kind? No place here for trouble. She began to close the door, and for a moment Ahiana's world shrank back into the cold, her shame burning hotter than the wind against her skin. She could almost hear her late husband's voice, could almost feel the weight of abandonment settling again. Before the door latched, a hand appeared, large, calloused, steady. The man who had been silent until then now stepped into the threshold. His name was Colton Hale, 33 years old, the kind of man whose silence carried more weight than a roomful of talkers. His face bore the lines of work under sun and wind, his shoulders wide from years of labor. He did not speak quickly, as though each word had to be tested before it left his mouth. His eyes rested on the young woman, not pitying, not condemning, but considering. "One night," he said simply, his voice a quiet rumble. The tension in the room did not ease, but the decision had been made. The others looked away, their glares sharp with judgment, but Colton moved aside and let her in. She stepped across the threshold, her heart hammering in her chest, her body trembling less from the cold than from the fragile thread of hope. She bowed her head, clutching the shawl closer, unable to speak gratitude. It was not welcome she had been given, only reprieve, yet even that felt like grace. The fire snapped softly as she crouched near it, drawing her hands toward the warmth. A bowl of soup was set before her, though the woman who placed it down did not hide her disapproval. Every mouthful tasted like both gift and humiliation. Around her, hushed voices continued. "She'll bring trouble. No good comes of this. Mark my words." Each whisper pressed her lower against the earth, but she forced the soup down because pride could not fill her stomach. That night she lay curled on a mat near the dying fire, listening to the murmurs from behind closed doors. Her eyelids refused rest, and her heart kept racing in her chest, unsure if dawn would bring kindness or dismissal. She thought of slipping away before first light, of sparing herself the sting of rejection. But exhaustion anchored her. She slept in fragments, each dream heavy with loss. When she woke, the house was quiet save for the creak of wood and the soft thud of boots. She rose and found Colton already outside tending the horses. The early sun stretched long shadows over the corral, and the smell of hay and leather filled the cool air. He moved with a quiet assurance, his hands working with rhythm, his silence steady as stone. She lingered in the doorway, unsure if he noticed her watching. Something in the sight of him made the hollow space inside her ache differently, not with hunger but with something older, something she could not yet name. He did not tell her to leave. Nor did he invite her to stay. Instead, as though it were the most natural thing in the world, he handed her a bucket and gestured toward the feed sacks. She hesitated, then followed, pouring grain with careful hands. The horses nickered, their warmth fogging in the morning air. A small, almost imperceptible nod passed between them, an understanding sealed without words. In that gesture she felt both acknowledged and tested. Days unfolded like this, quietly, each marked not by declarations but by small exchanges. She cooked what little she could, mended torn cloth and hummed old tunes while working. He in turn left bread for her, mended the edge of her shawl, showed her the rhythm of the land. He rarely spoke more than a sentence at a time, but his silence grew less heavy, less distant. She began to sense that his loneliness had its own story, unspoken but written in the lines of his face. What wound had closed him off from others? Still the outside world pressed close. One afternoon, a rider passing the ranch spat at the ground near her feet, muttering slurs before galloping on. Shame burned her cheeks, but she did not flinch. Colton stood nearby, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing, though he said nothing. The silence held a promise, one she did not fully understand yet. Word spread in town as it always did. Colton Hale kept a widow under his roof. Whispers sharpened into open disdain. Hands that once greeted him with ease now hesitated, trades grew harder, the weight of judgment heavier with each passing week. She saw the cost he bore and felt guilt pierce her. Had she stolen his place among his own people? She considered leaving, sparing him further scorn. But each time she thought of walking away, her feet would not move. His quiet gestures, the way he set her place at the table without asking, the way he worked beside her without complaint, they rooted her. And yet the pressure grew. One evening men from town came directly, their voices sharp, their threat clear. Send her away or you'll lose everything. The air was brittle with tension, and for a long moment Colton said nothing. Ahiana felt the pull of despair again, her hand already reaching for her shawl, ready to walk into the night rather than cost him more. But then Colton's voice came, steady, certain. I've already chosen. He stepped forward, not in anger, but with a calm defiance that left no space for argument. In front of them all, he took her hand. The world seemed to hold its breath, the wind falling still. She trembled, not with fear, but with the startling weight of being seen, of being claimed not as a burden but as a partner. The eyes upon them promised hardship ahead, yet for the first time she felt her heart steady in her chest. The days that followed were not easy. The land did not soften, nor did the judgment vanish. But within the quiet of the ranch, a different rhythm took root. She laughed, a sound she thought she had lost while brushing the horses. He let his shoulders rest at night, no longer so burdened with silence. Together they stitched small mercies into something larger, a life neither of them had dared to imagine again. Stories like theirs do not end in grand triumphs or riches. They end in mornings of shared bread, in evenings of humming by the fire, in the slow weaving of dignity out of broken threads. Some hearts are not rescued in battles, but in the steady grace of ordinary days. And if you listen closely, walking the prairie at dusk, you might still hear her song rising with the wind, gentle, enduring, carried far beyond the limits of the land.